There's a pattern you might notice where something that once felt central quietly fades into the background, like the idea of a stalker.
Hi, my name is Stina. Welcome back to my channel. In the hidden true crime coverage, before I get into this, I just want to be clear about the lens I'm using, as usual. I'm not a psychologist or a mental health professional. My background is in communication, and I tend to notice patterns in how things are presented and how that shapes what we see. And one of the ways this shows up is through a shift in emphasis over time. Not removed completely, not denied, just less focused on. Something that felt very central early on starts to feel more like background context later. Something like the idea of a stalker.
For example, early on in the 9 hour live, the idea of a stalker felt very central. It was detailed, repeated, and clearly framed as a major concern. Even in the nearly 4 hour response video, that same idea was still heavily emphasized. But in later content, that emphasis seems to shift. It's either brought up less or no longer framed as central in the same way.
That shift matters because it changes what the viewer is paying attention to. When attention shifts, interpretation follows. And when something starts getting a strong public reaction, one of the most common responses is a shift in emphasis. And going back to hidden true crime, this is one of the places where I started to notice it. But of course, not the only place. It's all proof of that is all around us. Not in one specific moment, but in how the emphasis shifts across videos over time. And I think what makes this easy to miss is that most people aren't tracking what's no longer being emphasized. They're just taking in what's being said in the moment, which is a very human reaction. Distraction, in other words, really does work. Um, Distract with other information. So when something becomes less central, it doesn't always register as a change, even though it is. And this isn't just something you see in one case. This shows up anytime there's pressure around how something is being interpreted. That's part of why narrative framing matters so much, because what stays central and what doesn't shapes how everything else is understood. So it's not always about what changes. Sometimes it's about what quietly moves out of focus. And once you start noticing that, you're not just watching what is being said, you are noticing what isn't being emphasized the same way anymore. So, if you're here because you're trying to understand what's actually happening beneath the surface, that's what I focus on here. And I'll be breaking this down in other cases as well. See you next time.